today's parable of the talents, Jesus explains that while he is away, we are to be using our gifts and talents and the consequences if we choose not to. The theme of the parable is given in the first verse, verse 14. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. Many people see this as an example of how we should handle money, but it's not. The parable uses money as an example, but it symbolizes much more. The point of the parable is the responsibility of the servants while the master is away. The man is about to leave on a journey, and he puts his servants in charge of his property, in this case, his monetary property. Remember, in 2 days, Jesus will die on the cross. He will go away on a journey, and his servants, the disciples, and all believers are to take care of what belongs to him and do his work until he returns. The man then divides up his money among his servants according to their abilities. No one receives more than they can handle. If they failed, it wasn't because they were asked to do something they were incapable of doing, but because of laziness, fear, or contempt for their Lord. The unit of money they were given was a talent. A talent was a Roman silver coin. And it was worth 6,000 denarii. And a denarius was worth 1 day's wages. So the first man was given 5 talents, the second was given 2 talents, and the third was given 1 talent. However, this parable isn't about the amount of money each man was given, but rather the stewardship of what has been given to each individual person. The talents represent any kind of resource that we have been given, whether it be money, earthly possessions, time, spiritual gifts, or natural talents. The amount given to each man is different, and they represent the personal gifts and abilities of each person. In verse 16, we're told that the first man was given 5 talents, and he went at once and put his money to work. The words "at once" tell us the proper urgency with which he went about doing his work. We know that he doubled his talents. We're not told how, but he did increase his master's net worth, giving him 10 talents. Again, the amount of increase doesn't matter. What matters is that he was busy doing his master's work, using what was given to him for his master's glorification. The same is true of the second servant. He took his 2 talents and doubled them, giving his master 4 talents. But the third servant took his 1 talent and he hid it in the ground to keep it safe. It is important to note that the servant did not increase or decrease his master's property. He just preserved it. Nothing was gained. It was only maintained. Verse 19, after a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled his account with them. After a long time tells us that the master is delayed in coming home. And this ties this parable to last week's parable, where the groom was late in arriving for the wedding banquet. It also means the master gave his servants plenty of time to work with the talents he had given them. The words, he settled his accounts with them, isn't about the servant's surprise of being caught off guard by his arrival. The focus is not on the event of the master's return, but rather on the conduct of the servants while he was gone. Beginning with verse 20, each servant comes individually before his master to give an account of his actions. The first 2 tell how much they were entrusted with and then how much they gained. And the master says, "Well done, good and faithful servants. You have been faithful with a few things, therefore I will put you in charge of many. Come and share your master's happiness." And because of their faithfulness, they're put in charge of more. They're promoted, and they share in their master's joy. The third servant, however, makes no reference to the amount he was given. He begins by trying to justify what he did or did not do with his talent. He begins by making excuses. "Oh, I knew you were a hard master and I was afraid, so I hid your talents in the ground," he said. He knew his master reaped where he did not plant. But in doing so, he also revealed that he knew his master expected a profit, some sort of gain. So why didn't he use his talent? Perhaps he feared that if he invested it and was successful, yes, he would gain a little. But if he failed, he would lose a lot, maybe even his life. Maybe he was upset because he received less than the others and felt that it wasn't worth his time. However, even those given less are expected to increase what they have. But Jesus' next words uncover his true undoing: laziness. A laziness born out of fear and a lack of faith in his master's grace. The result of hiding the talent is he didn't gain anything for his master. The master says, "You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have at least received it back with interest." Notice, the servant isn't called wicked because he's immoral or has done anything illegal, but rather because of his bad stewardship, because he did nothing. What made it worse is that he knew his master expected a gain, so at least he should have put the talent in the bank where it would have been just as safe, probably safer, and gained interest. Now, as part of his judgment, the talent is taken from him and given to one who had 10 talents. The relationship between the servant and the master has been severed. The servant is then called worthless and thrown into the darkness where there was weeping and gnashing of teeth. The parable teaches that those who are faithful and steadfast are blessed, and those who are unfaithful and lazy will lose it all. The meaning of this parable cannot be missed. Until Jesus returns, all believers are called to be faithful and engaged in the service to the kingdom. We are not to be passive, just maintaining the church, but instead we are to be busy growing the church, using the talents God has given us. Can God get the job done without us? Yes, of course. But it is his great pleasure to work with us. God calls each of us to participate in his kingdom building. He calls each of his sons and daughters to the vineyard. He invites his children to the wedding banquet. Oh, what an awesome honor and privilege we have been given. But if we fail to do our part, we will lose our blessings. God gives each of us talents and expects us to use them in ministry until he returns. And the issue isn't how much talent we have, but how we use what we have been given. If you would have asked the third servant if he believed his master was going to return, he would have said, of course. But he didn't live out what he believed. Many Christians today will affirm the idea that Jesus will return and yet not lift a finger to do his ministry. The third servant did not appreciate the opportunity that his master had given him. If he had gained but even a little interest, he would have received the same blessing as the other two. But instead of loving his Lord, he feared him. Now, we are called to fear God, but not a fear that paralyzes us, but a fear that mobilizes us to serve him. This good fear is a reverence and love which causes us to desire to please God. You see, love and faithfulness go together. A husband and wife who love one another will also be faithful to one another. Parents who love their children are faithful to care and provide for them. And Christians who love their Lord will be faithful to do the work given to them. We can't make excuses to avoid what God has called us to do. God gives each of us different talents, but he doesn't ask for the same results. However, he does ask that we do the best we can with what we have been blessed with. But many people are not. They're acting like King Saul, who in 1 Samuel 10, 9-24, tried to hide from his calling to be king. They try to hide from God, try to hide their gifts from the church. But God knows and sees you. And the truth is, others in the church see your gifts and talents as well. And they're waiting for you to step up and use them the way God has intended. Many people think the reward of doing good work is less work. If I just work hard enough, I'll get promoted to Easy Street and I can make others do all the work. But Jesus says the opposite is true. He who is faithful with a little will be given more. What an honor and blessing. You see, the work we do today prepares us for the work God has planned for us tomorrow. And the faithfulness is the key. David was faithful with his father's sheep, and God made him a shepherd of a flock of millions. Joshua was a faithful servant of Moses, and God made him the leader of a nation. Timothy was a faithful student of Paul, and God placed him in charge of the church when Paul was killed. For us, to fail to do what we have been given the talent to do is to ignore and insult our Lord. In Luke 6:46, Jesus said, "Why do you call me Lord and yet not do the things I tell you?" Several years ago, a popular TV show was Fear Factor, and I liked to watch it. And people would ask me, "Rick, what is your greatest fear?" And I told them then, and I still tell people today, my greatest fear is to stand before the Lord and hear the words, "You wicked and lazy servant." That makes me tremble and shake. Jesus said in Revelation 22:12, "Behold, I am coming soon. My reward is with me, and I will give to everyone according to what they have done." My friends, what have you done? Are you acting like King Saul and hiding from God? Are you afraid to use your talents out of fear of failure? Or are you seeking ways to use your gifts in ministry, trusting in the Lord's goodness? My friends, it is my prayer that one day we will all hear the words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Peace and blessings to you all.